Well, welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to interviews with me, Crypto Michael. Today, we're going to interview two people instead of one, as we're discussing API3 with Burak Benligiray, close, and Sasa Milic. Yes, also. Welcome, Burak and Sasha. Nice to meet you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, same.
Wonderful. So before we're going to start, I first ask everyone, what is your background and what have you been doing before API3 and why did you choose to go towards this project and work for this one? And let's begin with you, Burak.
So I come from a sort of an academic background. I used to do image processing, computer vision, deep learning, that kind of stuff. But I also like to work pretty applied in most cases. And I have been following the blockchain space pretty closely, but didn't really think of contributing much because I really didn't find it that interesting, at least challenging in the ways that I was looking for. But yeah, at some point I decided that, hey, maybe I should be implementing some of these smart contract use case ideas that I had in most cases integrated to the other stuff that I was already working on. And then I quickly found out that literally for each and every one of them, I needed an oracle. And if I did that in a centralized way with an oracle node that I run, then it wouldn't make any sense because it wouldn't be trustless at all. So that essentially gathered my attention towards oracles. And then I looked into the space and then essentially there were also other people, this was back in 2018. And there were a lot of other people that were realizing this as well. So we came together, started working on some solutions around the Oracle problem. But yeah, essentially the main thing that we detected back then was that an Oracle is essentially an API integration to a smart contract. And then no one was acknowledging this fact because it was as if the data was it was being made out of thin air by the Oracle nodes. But then, yeah, essentially the thing that we realized that was that APIs were the main part of the solution to this problem. And then we started working on that. And then at the start of 2020, we decided that we should have a fully fledged solution for this, including both a decentralized governance, including an Oracle protocol, a node that would be designed specifically for the solution that we had in mind. And then, yeah, that is how I got into API3.
Wonderful. And what about you, Sasha?
My background, so I studied computer science and statistics, and then I did a master's in computer science, and I started a PhD and then quit pretty soon after I started it. So I guess, yeah, I have an academic background, but I worked at many different places as a software engineer and as a data scientist. And then, so how I got into blockchain, around the time of the crash, 2017, 2018, I decided to actually take a look at what Bitcoin was and take a look at what the algorithm was. So I just read the white paper and read some descriptions online. And I'd taken some university courses. So I took a grad course in theory of distributed computing. So I was familiar with traditional consensus algorithms. And it's kind of interesting because a lot of theoretical results coming out of distributed computing are impossibility results. Most of the proofs that I saw in my grad course were things that you actually provably can't do with the traditional kind of consensus models. So I actually didn't find that research area particularly interesting. And then I saw Bitcoin and I thought it was probably the most interesting algorithm I'd ever seen. And it's kind of a cliche in this space to say that you're in it for the tech, but I actually got interested because of the tech. But then the cliche, you go down the rabbit hole that happened to me. So I got interested in all the political implications and the economic implications and the community surrounding crypto and Bitcoin. So I got obsessed pretty quickly, but it was initially the technology that I thought was so cool. And yeah, so I've been pretty much obsessed ever since. And yeah, similar to what Burak said, when I first heard about Ethereum in particular, and it being this generalized computer, and how it can do contracts. I remember thinking, you know, if I hire someone to fix my fridge, how does anyone know he actually fixed my fridge? Like I got the idea of like having a programmatic contract, but I'm like, how does anyone know that anything happened? You know, how does anyone know that a contract should actually basically like where do you get that data from? I remember asking that, and then it was actually like a while after I heard about the Oracle problem, and it made sense to me because I had already asked that question, like where do you get this data from? And then all these other applications are only possible. These other applications of blockchain are only possible if you can get data on the blockchain. That's not just, you know, who owns what token. So did someone want to say something?
No. I was just smiling about that.
Yeah, and just API3. So I was already interested in the Oracle space, and I actually did some consulting with some Oracle companies, and I saw a lot of issues that, I mean, I don't want to get, well, maybe we can discuss that after, but I saw a lot of issues come up when you don't know where people get their data from. And in particular, you don't really know who's telling the truth and who's not, if people are getting their information from different places. And I talked to Burak about this because I was familiar with him working in the space, and I'd read some of his work, and we pretty much aligned with what we saw, some of the issues with current solutions. And then after talking, Burak pretty much just asked me to work on the white paper. It all happened pretty quickly.
Well, that's quite natural, yeah. So you're both involved in API3 right now, and you've discussed it a little already, Burak, but what is the entire idea of API3 in itself? What is the solution it's trying to bring to the world? Why is it different from the rest? Could you explain something about the project itself and the fundamentals?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it is essentially seeing a bunch of problems with how things are being implemented at the moment, and then come up with a holistic solution that would solve all of these simultaneously. So I think the main problem is that oracles are a bit, in terms of a problem, it's a bit ill-defined in that you don't actually need oracles, and then oracles are impossible to implement as defined anyway. So, and then trying to come up with an oracle solution doesn't make much sense. And then what we actually want to do is we want to integrate individual APIs to smart contracts. And then if you want to create some kind of decentralization, then you should be decentralizing those APIs, meaning that you should be using multiple APIs, which is what the decentralized API idea is all about. And then the ideal way of doing that would be, so if I am integrating an API to a smart contract, why do I have a third-party middleman do this integration? Why don't I have the API provider themselves run the Oracle node? Because an API, even though, so when we think of an API, it is essentially the interface of a program, a computer program. So when you think of it as like this, it feels like an abstract concept, but an API in the real world is actually, there's this business that has data and services that they want to provide in a programmatic way. They set up an API and then they charge for access to this API. So there is actually this entity called the API provider, which is a business that is operating this API. So it only makes sense for this API provider to do this integration, because when you are using an API, you're already trusting the API provider to provide you with data and services correctly. And then if you also have them act as the integrator, then that doesn't degrade trustlessness anymore. And then compared to that, having this person whose identity you can't really verify act as the middleman is far less secure, and also it creates additional cost because now you also have to pay them. So it is pretty suboptimal. So what you should be doing is using a first-party oracle to do this integration, which is an oracle that is operated by the API provider themselves, and then decentralize those. And then there's another problem. So you want to use multiple APIs that are integrated with first-party oracles. So you now need to curate decentralized APIs. So if a centrally governed entity creates these decentralized APIs, again, it doesn't make any sense. It is completely centralized because it is centralized at the governance level. So now you also have to decentralize the governance. So an Oracle solution that doesn't have decentralized governance is essentially centralized. So it is not negotiable for the Oracle solution to be like decentrally governed. It has to be. So that is also why we are founded with a DAO from the start, because that is one of the prerequisites of solving this problem correctly.
All right, so API3 is in general about decentralized APIs, and we're going to discuss the DAO part. That's something that's just recently started, right? March 1st or close to it. But you just mentioned it already, but API3 is all about decentralized APIs. And what additional value is it bringing to the space? And could you, for just a complete noob, explain what decentralized APIs are for a beginner, as this overall subject is maybe a little too far for any new listener to this topic either way? Maybe Sasha could answer to that question.
Yeah. So the way that a blockchain, like a general blockchain like Ethereum works, is that you have consensus among every node in the network has to agree on this global state of the machine. And that means that every single node in the network has to do a certain computation. So it's like, everyone has to do the same computation and then like agree on the general state. So what that implies is that you can only run computations on data that's on the network or that's on the blockchain. So what that actually means practically is like what I mentioned before about who owns what. Like the data on the blockchain is essentially what address holds what information. Like that's the native data on the blockchain. So if you want something that exists outside of the blockchain, like a price, like ironically, the price of Ethereum isn't on the blockchain. That's decided outside of the blockchain. I mean, ignoring things like decentralized exchanges, but most of the trading happens outside of the blockchain. Or if you want to know what the weather is, or if you want to know, a stock price, anything that exists that's not about data on the blockchain exists outside the blockchain, and there's no nice way to input. There's no easy way to kind of get that data on the blockchain. And the reason you need that is that so many industries could benefit from decentralized consensus. So all these things we talk about removing middlemen, like you could apply this to the insurance industry, to law to a certain extent, to government to a certain extent, instead of trusting a series of like trusted middlemen to allow for people to exchange or write contracts between each other. Like this could be replaced with a decentralized consensus mechanism. But all of these applications, like for example, insurance, I usually use the example of flight insurance. Like if you want to insure your flight ticket, you need to know if the flight actually occurred and when it did. And if you're going to write a smart contract, you need that information. Like, did the flight actually happen? Was it late? Or if you want to write a derivatives contract, you need to know prices. So any really interesting application of blockchain needs information. And in order to, and the thing with the blockchain and smart contracts, it's only as secure as its weakest link. And if you're trusting a single node for data, that's your weakest link, and you kind of destroy the whole point of blockchain about security through distributed consensus. So you need to input data in a distributed way in order to allow for these interesting applications, but allow them in such a way that it maintains the benefits of the blockchain.
Would you say that in the entire world, that often you've discussed insurance, but you've also got the financial world and just simple getting a plumber or anything, there's always that sort of lack of information for the customer. The other counterparty always knows the cost and knows more information than yourself. So would you also argue that through decentralized oracles, markets will become more efficient, or you get more information so you can make a more decent decision for yourself as well?
maybe I'll answer your question the way I understood it, and then you can tell me if I answered it or not. But I think this is true, not just for oracles, but for blockchain in general.
True.
Is that you as a user are anonymous to an extent, but like everything that happens on the blockchain is visible to everyone. And I think that's another benefit other than like, so I mentioned one benefit of blockchain being distributed consensus and being able to remove trusted middlemen from all these different institutional processes. But another benefit is transparency. Like everything that happens on the blockchain is transparent. Like you can see, who's trading what and how much, and that's hugely benefit. And I think a recent good example of why that's beneficial is what's been going on with GameStop. Like the fact that no one knows how much is shorted, or everyone's guessing who shorted what, and has it been covered? We don't know. There's all this, like, people have to like dig through the internet or like make assumptions about what's actually happening. But if that was happening on the blockchain, you could literally see, okay, this much has been shorted by this party. Well, the party's anonymous, but you can kind of see, what's happening. You're not guessing about, like, I mean, I haven't followed GameStop recently, but I think people are still guessing, like, is this thing shorted or not? Or have the shorts been covered? Like something like that you wouldn't have to guess on the blockchain. If this was done on the blockchain, it would be entirely visible. And I think, I think the transparency of the blockchain and what you said about market efficiency, I think that applies for everything, not just Oracle markets, for example. I think that's a general benefit of the blockchain.
Yeah, there are so many different layers, but like in general stuff, you simply don't know what actual costs are for something that you're doing. And by providing data, which is accessible for everyone, you can make those markets more efficient rather than just the price movement on an exchange or etc., but through everything in life. So coming to the next question is, in what role do you expect decentralized oracles to play a significant role in the world right now? And what type of markets or industries are going to provide strong adoption for decentralized oracles? Maybe Burak, that question is for you.
So if you look at the current use cases of smart contracts, I think the first and the only successful one was DeFi. And I think we are coming to its full potential at this moment. And I'm not expecting it to grow in the current state anymore, but rather we would be having some kind of paradigm shift for it to grow in a larger. But yeah, I think the main reason why DeFi became successful was that real world financial activity and data related to it was integrated to blockchain and smart contracts. And then smart contracts based on that data were now able to be built. So that is essentially why DeFi was able to produce the amount of value that it did, or capture the amount of value that it did. So then, to me, this means that to be able to create these kind of successful use cases, we need to bring real-world businesses and data related to those businesses, and real-world data tied to real-world financial activities. And by real-world, I mean non-blockchain, because that is what matters for the smart contract and blockchain. Whatever that is outside of the blockchain is very interesting because they are not available, and the use cases that depend on them are completely unexplored. And that means that essentially the whole market would be yours as soon as you would be able to capitalize on that. So when we look at smart contracts as Web 3.0 and seeing that right now whatever you can think of, all kinds of businesses take place in Web 2.0. And to me, this means that when these businesses will want to migrate to Web 3.0, and then these business activities will take place, either the business activities themselves or business activities related to the ones that happen on the real world. For example, like the traditional finance and the DeFi that's happening right now. And then that means to me that, essentially it will scale with the scale of the whole internet, and essentially whatever financial or trade activity that we have on internet will have some projection in Web 3.0, and oracles will be the things that will be allowing that. So I think what really matters with oracles is not only security, for example, but also variety. So you would want to integrate any and all kinds of data that you could think of, the smart contracts, to be able to capitalize on that. So yeah, I'm essentially going back to the original question. I think in the long term, they will facilitate the migration from Web 2.0 to 3.0. And that will mean that essentially they will play a role in pretty much any sector that you can think of.
All right, that's wonderful. Then there's also something else, as we already know, there's different oracles in the market right now. We've got Chainlink, we've got Band Protocol, Dia, Teller. In what way is API3 different from those, and how could those other oracles benefit from decentralized APIs, Sasha?
I think Burak kind of mentioned this before, maybe he wants to add on to it, but if you look at the white papers for these projects, they model the source of their data as this like theoretical thing that exists outside of the system. Like it's not so. But in practice, like what you see right now is what's happening with oracles that are actually in the ecosystem. They take data from web APIs. So theoretically, you could get your data from anywhere. And a lot of these, I think most of these projects model the data source, as this theoretical source of data that exists outside of the system. But in practice, you're mostly getting data from web APIs. And one of our main kind of design points, or the way that we've designed it is, in practice, you're mostly getting data from web APIs, and you're going to have a suboptimal solution if you don't recognize this and don't build a solution that's meant to integrate web APIs directly. And that includes like taking into consideration API provider business models. So yeah, does Burak, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think that is the main point, like approaching the problem from a practical perspective. Like it doesn't, like it looking good on the white paper is not enough. It should also work for everyone, and it should make sense for everyone to participate in the system. So that's what we're trying to do.
And API3 is relatively new in the sense that it's not too long on the markets as well. And there's some progress recently with the DAO. You're building further. What's the current status of API3 in general, and when do you expect it to be running fully, Sasha?
Burak's better to answer this.
Wonderful. Then we go to Burak.
Okay. Yeah. So at the moment we have an existing DAO, which like we actually launched with a DAO, but then we are also developing an authoritative version, which will allow token staking. So one of the main utilities of the token is governance in the DAO. And then the other two are receiving staking rewards for governing, and then the tokens that are staked being used as collateral for insurance that covers the services that the DAO provides. So at the moment we are developing this DAO, and like it has already, like it is undergoing the first audit. So we are expecting to be done with the audits fairly soon, and then launch it in a few months, essentially. And then that is only the governance part of the project. Obviously, we also in parallel working on the solutions themselves, like the core solutions. So we are at the moment working on the protocol, working on Air node, which is this Oracle node that is designed to be run in a first-party way, meaning that it is designed to be run by API providers, because there are some problems with existing Oracle nodes regarding if it would be feasible for API providers to operate them, because they are more designed as blockchain nodes, and blockchain nodes are typically difficult to deal with And then the API providers don't tend to want to deal with that essentially. So we are designing everything in a way that it would make sense for the API provider to do this, and they wouldn't mind whatever resources that they would have to expand to do that, which is not much anyway. Yeah, so we are also working on the Oracle solutions in parallel, and then we have an integration platform. So another thing that we are looking towards is that we want to, as I've said, we need to integrate a lot of APIs, and these APIs are all real-world businesses. So actually, I find it a bit disappointing that when people think about Oracle, they think about some kind of contract that when you call, it returns you the price of an asset. I mean, that's a pretty limited imagination. So ideally, you would be integrated to hundreds and thousands of APIs, and these APIs would have multiple endpoints, each returning you a different kind of data. For example, this can be like the API endpoint of an SAP application that is holding the data from a company, for example, whatever you can think of. So, but the thing is, pretty much any Oracle solution can, in theory, make these integrations, but then you should have some kind of integration solution that will allow you to do this at scale. So hundreds and thousands of unique APIs, you should be able to practically integrate to the network. So that is essentially Chain API, which is an integration platform that we are working on that will make these integrations extremely easy. So yeah, we are working on a lot of things in parallel, and like, I'm assuming that they will be delivered like together again simultaneously, and like it will be a bunch of announcements at the same time. Yeah, a lot of things are going on, and I think, yeah, I am pretty hopeful about how they will turn out.
Well, there's lots to process still and progress as well. But you've mentioned it that you want to utilize the blockchain protocol by staking, etc., and the insurance that you have on the blockchain in itself. I've got a question regarding that. Like, API3 token holders can participate in the DAO by staking tokens, which automatically are also used as a collateral in the insurance fund. Maybe how does this insurance fund work, and how does it add to a safer and better ecosystem? As for staking, that's known already, but how does it work with the insurance fund?
I think this, a lot of people on the team think this, but insurance is highly underutilized in blockchain. So right now, the way that we do security in blockchain in general is to prevent anything bad from ever happening, which is good. So it's like everything right now is preventative. Like, how do we prevent any kind of hack from ever happening? But oracles are a little bit different. And I mean, I have a long article on this, but basically when you're dealing with data that exists outside of the blockchain and data that's changes regularly and is a real number and isn't some like discrete value, it's really hard to prevent anything bad from ever happening. So the approach we're doing is minimize anything bad, like any kind of malicious input from an oracle, like minimize the likelihood of that happening. But then on top of that, provide insurance in case something bad does happen. So yeah, that's kind of our security model. And I have, like I said, I have a long article explaining why trying to detect a faulty oracle at the moment that it responds is extremely difficult, if not impossible. So insurance just seems like the right security approach. And another thing about insurance is that it provides what we call quantifiable security. Like if you're a smart contract that's using one of our data feeds and you have it insured for some X amount, you can now quantify how much you can trust that oracle with. You know, like if it's insured up to a certain amount, you can trust it up to a certain amount. And this is actually how security is done traditionally in the blockchain space. Like you can measure how secure a system is by an actual monetary value. Like with Bitcoin, like a 51% attack, you can compute. There's actually websites that'll tell you exactly how much it would cost to get enough computational power to hack Bitcoin. Same with Ethereum. Like there's this great article that Vitalik Buterin wrote where he compares the security of proof of stake and proof of work, and he compares them by how much money would you have to spend to actually hack these consensus algorithms. So we're applying the same high level principle of you need to be able to quantify how secure your system is with an actual monetary value. You can't say your Oracle's data feed is like super secure. Like you just can't do that in blockchain. You actually have to give a number. So having a data feed that's insured, that gives you a lower bound. Like you can probably for various reasons, you can probably trust it with more than what it's insured for, but at least you have a lower bound. Like at least you have a number that you can say, I can trust this data feed with this much, with a contract valued at this much. So that's the idea with insurance. It's how we deal with security. So minimize risk, but then whatever risk remains, we insure that. And it also provides quantifiable security, which I think any system you build in blockchain should be quantifiably secure. You should say exactly how much someone can trust your system by like some monetary value about how much it costs to hack that system. Like I think it's absolutely necessary. And a lot of some Oracle solutions do this. I think Dia, correct me if I'm wrong, they talk about this, but a lot of Oracle solutions don't.
Yeah, Dia, that's how we pronounce it here.
Yeah.
It's also one that I've got on the radar. But regardless of that, we discussed the insurance fund right now, and we also have the DeFi markets and the NFT markets right now, which are just heating up heavily. And when the good is there, there's also lots of bad stuff happening, which is that the DeFi market is currently being plagued by Oracle exploits that result in tremendous losses towards the users. Like, what makes DeFi so vulnerable right now? Is it that security, what you've just discussed? Is it not having an insurance? And how does API3 tackle this issue?
So, yeah, well, why DeFi has problems is a big question.
I know. We can make a separate podcast about that.
So I don't know if... okay, so one thing we have been discussing internally is because if we're going to have an insurance pool, we're going to have to be measuring risk, or we're going to partner with projects that do work on insurance. So insurance is extremely complicated, but it essentially comes down to measuring risk and measuring the cost of failure. Like every insurance model essentially has these two primary parameters. Like what is the risk of something happening? What is the cost of that thing happening? So what we see is that there's a lot of protocols out there that are just too risky. So a lot of people, I've seen some FUD on our project about, you're going to put money in the insurance pool and you're going to lose it. But that's not, insurance has a history outside of the blockchain. And for example, like insurance companies, for good or for bad, they don't insure you if you're, have late stage cancer, for example. Like they don't insure you if you live in a hurricane zone. Like there's some things that are too risky that traditional insurance companies just don't insure you. And I think the same principle is going to apply here. Like if you have an extremely risky protocol, then it would be a really bad idea for us to insure you. So I think this is actually going to have a positive effect on the space because we're going to start talking about risk explicitly. So I don't think just us, like there are some other projects that are doing this, but I don't think we don't talk about risk broadly enough. But I think once insurance starts becoming bigger in the blockchain space, we're going to be talking about risk more explicitly, measuring risk more explicitly. And it's going to be clear that some protocols, some DeFi protocols are just structured in a way that's too risky. And it's not necessarily, if $10 million can get liquidated because of one faulty Oracle, that's probably a problem with your architecture.
Yeah, so I don't think that is specific to individual projects, but rather it is the general architecture that the field takes on. So have a huge pool of collateral and then hook that up to a contract that gets the data from one Oracle source and then hope that that Oracle will not fail. And the thing is, you are doing everything to make it fail. Like you are giving every incentive for it to fail and then hoping that it will not fail. And that is becoming worse and worse. So if you have the whole DeFi, for example, using the same data feed, and then essentially the whole DeFi is ignoring the fact that if that fails, like we are going into a new winter, like early. This will like stop the current cycle at its tracks. So yeah, I'm not hopeful that people will figure this out themselves. So they will have to be taught this by an expensive lesson. But yeah, I agree that it is essentially an architectural problem in how the whole system is designed. It is, and it cannot be solved by more secure oracles. Like, because the thing is, yeah, as Sasha said, it is pretty important to being able to quantify your level of security. And at the moment, none of the Oracle solutions, I guess with the exception of UMA, for example, but then the widely used Oracle solutions don't provide any kind of guarantees in terms of how much they can secure. And then the DeFi market is growing larger and larger. That essentially means that at some point it will fail. So, and then the solution to that is not building more secure oracles, because the market will keep on growing. And at some point, that more secure oracle will also fail. So we need to, I think, come up with more robust architectures which fail like more locally instead of centrally failing and then bringing everything down with it.
All right.
Yes.
So,
yeah, so I guess that just summarizes as there's certain like systemic risks in DeFi, namely similar architectures and people using the same Oracle sources. It creates systemic risks in the whole ecosystem.
So then another thing that I would like to ask regarding the current ecosystem that we live in is that there's Ethereum, and Ethereum has a major issue right now, which is the high transaction fees, which is taking Cardano, Atom, other ecosystems to a higher level. So have you thought about the entire high transaction fee problem? And if so, through which implementations do you try to improve this in aspect to, in particular, compared to third-party Oracle solutions on Ethereum, for instance?
Yeah, in general, I actually don't really agree that Ethereum has a scaling problem. In that,
in short term, probably it has right now. We can see it if we use a DEX, for instance, right?
Yeah, but a lot of people are using it because the fees they pay are nothing next to, for example, what they make out of the transaction. So I'm just looking at this from a more like abstract level. No network is too congested because someone is using it to get congested. So if it was too expensive, it wouldn't be used and then go down to the proper levels. But yeah, I get what you mean. And
it depends on who you ask. People with more money to trade, people with less money to trade.
Yeah, the main problem there is like it limits the use cases a lot. So DeFi, it remains a feasible use case, but then, for example, prediction markets suffer because, for example, if this is a bet on a match, like, and the total pot is $100, then it doesn't make sense to bet on this because like you will be paying $15 for a transaction. Yeah, so I agree, it is an issue. And then the question is how we would be dealing with this problem. So I think, yeah, one of the problems is that, people are not using the correct chains for correct use cases. So, I mean, doing everything on Ethereum mainnet is obviously ideal. But if your use case, if this is, again, a prediction market that you will be betting $20 on a match, then you probably shouldn't be doing this on Ethereum mainnet. Yeah, so I think using side chains or alternative chains for these kinds of use cases is a much better solution compared to, for example, setting up a side chain for oracles and then sourcing your data from there to Ethereum mainnet, for example, because people interacting with the prediction market contract will again spend a lot in gas in transaction fees. So it is not only the Oracle gas fees that they would be suffering from. So it doesn't solve the problem completely. And then another problem with Oracle sidechains is that, well, it just adds to the lack of transparency that already exists at the moment. So there are these third-party oracles that we don't know who they are. Like, there is no decentralized identity solution. And then we don't know where they get their data from, because they cannot announce that, hey, I'm getting my data from this API because it's illegal. Essentially, they would be saying that they are reselling data, which is against the terms of conditions. And then, yeah, sidechains are just another way of doing this even more obviously. Like, they just spit out a piece of data that you don't have any idea about how it is created. So, I mean, in general, I don't think that that is a good solution for oracles and scaling, but rather you should be serving on other chains natively. So the chain that is being served on should be used as the platform that aggregates the data out of multiple first-party oracles, and then you should be serving the data there. If you are serving an Ethereum mainnet, again, you should be serving on that chain natively, because these side chains and the corresponding bridges, they are also points of failure, because, for example, the regular way of implementing this is, well, in the side chain, the oracles come up with a common answer, and then one of them is assigned to post this point of data to the chain. And then if they deny to post that, then the data gets delayed. And if this is a sort of a live data feed, for example, a DeFi project uses, that means that the data update can be delayed, which may result in losses. So it is also not very secure as well. Yeah, so to sum up, I think the good solution is to use the correct chain for the correct use case, and then keeping serving chains natively rather than using Oracle-specific sidechains.
Wonderful. I'd love to move forward. As we've discussed API3, we've discussed how far you are right now, but let's discuss what's coming in the future. As I've also seen on your Twitter feed that you are making many partnerships lately, or announcing those. Are you currently heavily focused on DeFi partnerships, or also outside of the blockchain to bring them into the ecosystem, rather focus more on that than on DeFi solutions? And what can we expect from API3 in the near future or in the coming months? We've discussed this a little already, but maybe you want to add something to that and the overall partnerships that you're making right now.
Actually, yeah, we have multiple BD angles, that business development angles, that we are following at the moment. So for most blockchain projects, it is very much blockchain focused, in that you will be partnering with blockchain projects. The thing is, if you are doing that as an Oracle solution, then like you're doing something very wrong, because your role as an Oracle solution is to be an integrator between the blockchain world and the real world. So you should be making as many partnerships with the real world businesses as you are doing with blockchain projects, and probably even more, because a lot of those blockchain projects will not be here 1 year from now, but all the real world businesses will stay for 5-10 years, most likely. Yeah, so essentially we are trying to do that. We are trying to do our business development across all angles, and a lot of the partnerships that we announce are more on the blockchain side. Yeah, so it is essentially a matter of preference in terms of what to announce and when. And this is what we are doing right now, announcing the blockchain project partnerships. And then there, as you said, we are announcing partnerships with DeFi projects, but this is not the extent of the use cases that we want our services to be used for. I think a very good example for that is prediction markets, because prediction markets it has always been a very promising use case, but it never really took off. And the main problem there was that, I mean, to be able to implement a prediction market, you need an oracle. And the thing is, in an abstract sense, DeFi is a prediction market for financial data. And then prediction markets can't really compete with DeFi in terms of like financial prediction markets. Then they need other kinds of data. And what Oracle solution provides this other kind of data? None, because they all do asset prices at the moment. So what we are hoping to do with prediction markets is that provide them with this wide variety of data. And then they would be able to essentially come up with a lot of different use cases that weren't possible before, and then essentially have prediction markets happen as a use case. And this also ties back to the scaling issue that you have mentioned. So prediction markets are very aware of this because their kind of use cases are more distributed across different kinds of data. And then that means that smaller amounts of pools, for example, and then more transactions. And then that means that for them to be able to be feasible, transaction fees have to be very low. So they tend to migrate to these side chains a lot earlier compared to, like, it makes more sense for them to do this compared to DeFi projects. They still can survive on Ethereum mainnet. And that's what we're planning to do essentially. Just follow them there and then provide them services natively on these chains that are much more scalable.
Wonderful. Then finally, the question is, where can we find API3? About you too, where can we find you too? If you have something to add, it's your moment right now. And I'll start off with Sasha. Where can we find API3 and where can we find your content as well, if you've mentioned the blog post as well?
Yeah, I feel like the fastest thing to do or the easiest thing to do is just Google API3. You can find our website. Our Telegram is pretty active. A lot of people ask questions there. And then we also have a Discord group. And you can see, where can people find the Telegram link actually?
It is on the website.
Yeah, also if you just search API3 Telegram, you should be able to find it. We also have a Medium page where we write a lot. Again, API3 on Medium. I have my own. So a lot of the blog posts were written on API3 were written by me, but I also write a lot of things about crypto in general. I wrote something recently about EIP 1559. So I write like general crypto things also. It's just my name.medium.com. And I just got a Twitter account too. So my name and 33.
Welcome on Twitter. Yeah. It's a wonderful world. The good and the bad.
I'm trying to figure out how to navigate it in a healthy way.
Well, it's a wonderful place. Let's say it that way. Burak, do you have anything to add to what Sasha said on this part?
Yeah, I tend to write more long form stuff. So I would definitely recommend you to go and read the white paper if you have the time, because it is pretty good. And then, yeah, we also have this Medium page for API3. It's essentially medium.com/API3. And then both Sasha and I post a lot of posts there. And if you can dig them under the partnership posts, they are pretty interesting too. And they are both related to API3 and also oracles and then even blockchain in general. So yeah, I'd recommend that.
Wonderful. I'm going to thank both of you for this interview. And I'm also wishing you lots of luck with the project itself and everything in the crypto space and being on Twitter. Have a wonderful day. And for the listeners, all the information about API3 is found in the description beneath this video.